First, almost spring. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Brady. Mr. Brady is absent at the moment. Ms. Conwell. There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilman Miller is in attendance.
Welcome, Mr. Miller. Thank you. As usual, hardest working man on the council. Is there public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
In your packets, you have the minutes of December 3rd. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion in a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you. 2020-0010.
Resolution number 2020-0010, authorizing an amendment to a revenue-generating agreement with City of Cleveland to lease space in the City of Cleveland Police Department headquarters located at 1300 Ontario Street, Cleveland.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, council members. My name is Matt Reimer with the Department of Public Works. This amendment request is an amendment to a revenue-generating lease agreement with the City of Cleveland for the City of Cleveland Division of Police spaces within the former Cleveland Police Building that the county purchased back in 2018. This lease agreement amendment amends the agreement to exercise the first of 3 potential option years of the City of Cleveland, to which they notified us back in August of 2019. It will increase the rent of the City of Cleveland spaces from $10 per square foot to $12 per square foot per the original lease agreement. It reduces parking from 143 spaces of the underground parking deck to 136. And then it also provides some phased square footage reductions based on our ongoing discussions with the city to try and accommodate some additional space needs for the county, in particular for our central booking planning alternatives. That is the reason for the delay in this amendment coming to this committee and to council as we work through some of those square footage plans and alternatives on behalf of the county needs. With that, I'm available to answer any of your questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, questions for Mr. Reimer? Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to Mr. Reimer, for the $12 square foot for the lease amount, is that something that was adequate from the county's standpoint? Because I had heard something like $15 was more of a adequate.
I would say we're in the order of magnitude range. Certainly it was the rate that was negotiated for this option year 2 years ago now when this lease was negotiated.
So it's just for one more year?
For 1 year, correct. For this option renewal period, if the city were to renew for a second renewal period, it would go another $2 per square foot higher at $14 a square foot.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Director, what's our best understanding as to how the City of Cleveland intends to use the space?
Through the chair to Councilman Miller, the city intends to use their space to the extent that they have been using it and continue to use it, and that is for the Division of Police needs within the building.
And how many square feet are we talking about?
For this period, currently approximately just shy of 141,000 square feet, specifically 140,478. But we will be reducing that. They're going to do some consolidation to offer up square footage to us for county needs down to the level of approximately 129,104 square feet. We are still in discussions with them on that, though.
And what is our best understanding as to how likely it is that this extension will be the last one, or whether they're likely to exercise an additional option for next year?
Through the chair to Councilman Miller, I can't speculate on that. I only know what is publicly available. I will say that just based on the timelines in our business of what it takes to get a project the size of what they need done, it wouldn't shock me that there's a second renewal period that is desired. But short of that, I can't speculate further on it.
So this is the first of 3 possible renewals. So if they go for the third one, does that go up to $16?
That would be correct, sir.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So given that the contract ended in October 1st of last year, what have we been charging them per square foot if we haven't negotiated until today the approval to collect 12?
Through the chair to Councilwoman Baker, the terms were set with the exception of the square footage. It's just the inability to invoice the city of Cleveland for those charges. So with this amendment going forward now, we will be able to invoice for the use of the space that the city had during this entire time, from the beginning of the period of 10/2/2019 until the time of amendment execution.
Have they paid anything between 10/1/19 and today?
They have not. It's my understanding that the last period ending on October 1st, 2019, they had paid for the first year, base year, a total of $1,996,312.82, and that is based on the base year agreement rent, their parking needs, as well as the agreed upon share of building operations costs, utilities and the
And do
like.
they pay monthly or do they pay all in one year?
They are invoiced and pay monthly.
So we will be retroacting then what is due as of October 1st, 2019 to today, and then they start monthly.
That is correct. October 2nd, but yes, that is correct. Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. And this is all predicated on, they're building a police headquarters somewhere. We paid $20 million for that building?
We paid $9.25 million, sir.
9.25?
Correct. And we have put in $6.6 million in renovations to date.
So with another extension, we almost cover our costs of buying the building itself.
For just the flat-out purchase, it won't take long to get close to that. You're correct, sir.
Now, and I don't know this, but what kind of personnel do they have in that building that they need 130 spaces to park?
It still houses the command for the Division of Police and numerous other detectives and operational offices. Although they have sent other operations to other facilities, they still have meaningful law enforcement operations operating out of the building.
Okay. All right. Anything further? And I'm going to assume that we want to get this moving so we can get paid.
That would be appreciated, sir.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, I'll accept a motion for Resolution 2020-0010 to the full council under second reading suspension.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
2020-0017.
Resolution number 2020-0017, authorizing a state contract with AT&T Corp. In the amount not to exceed $924,259.95 for network connectivity services for the next generation 911 system.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. This resolution covers the 911 internet circuits that allow us to connect from CCOMs when we take the call as well out to the PSAPs. It allows the information flow of the callback number, the location. This covers 29 circuits. It also covers 5 circuits on the radio side of the house. It's dated 7/31/2019 through 7/30/2024. So it's a 5-year contract, which is dated back to July 31st because of one circuit that expired in July. The others that came upon the once a 5-year after the 2014 are staggered between October and November due to some of the, as you remember, some of the contracting things we dealt with AT&T for other parts of the county. It became a little tougher to get signed agreements. We worked with AT&T, got those agreements, and got it into on-base in December. We have not, so this is 92% paid out of the wireless government fund, 7.5% out of the general fund, asking for consideration under second reading suspension rules. Here for any questions.
Questions? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion on 2020-0017 to the full council under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
2020-0018.
Resolution number 2020-0018, authorizing a contract with Passages Connecting Fathers and Sons in the amount not to exceed $1,065,476 for implementation of the Cognitive Behavioral Interventions for Offender Seeking Employment Program.
Good afternoon, Marty Murphy for the Corrections Planning Board. This is our contract. It's the second one with Passages Connecting Father and Sons for our CBI EMP employment program. It's a cognitive behavioral intervention program for offenders. They go through a multi-week training where they work on their misthinkings prior to getting them into the jobs market. We initially RFP'd for this and awarded a contract in May of 18. They've been doing a great job. They have actually more positions available for offenders than we are sending to them of offenders. And the jobs average $12.50 an hour. Some of them are way more, some are a little less, and include full benefits.
Where's funding come from?
This is funded through Justice Reinvestment and Incentive Act dollars, which is a line item in the state budget, which is also why it's 7/1/2019. The budget for the state didn't get passed until mid-July, and then the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction decided that they would release their bigger pools of money, their CCA 407, their CCA 408, and their TCAP prior to this pool. The money was accepted by the board in September. In October, we then got our money allocated at the next council meeting into fiscal. And then we proceeded with the contract process.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Murphy? Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to Mr. Murphy, how are the participants selected for the program?
They're on probation and unemployed. There's a screening that takes place if they are on disability or there's another meaningful reason. They may get bypassed, but it's everybody on probation initially as a candidate.
So this is something that we do after they get out, not
when
while they're in.
It is for people who are adjudicated and kept in Cuyahoga County on probation. So the reentry population is not a part of this particular contract. So once somebody ends up adjudicated, they are eligible if they're placed on county probation.
Thank you.
Good. Anything? Yes, ma'am.
So if the state had resolved their budget by the end of June instead of middle of July, how would you have been on time?
No, Councilwoman.
So that's really not, that's really not the core reason for this being 7 months late.
If the state had resolved their budget in the middle of June, we would have been doing this before the holidays, but it wouldn't shave 6 months off or give us, an opportunity for 2 weeks. When we get the award, we have to have it accepted before we can have an index code set up in fiscal. And this, as I said, was the third one that the state released, so we didn't have an opportunity to even set that up until into the fall. So both the state and the county have logistical issues, crossing the i's, dotting the t's. You bring in a vendor and then you bring in the court, and you need signatures from everybody. It takes a little bit of time.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from Mr. Murphy? Again, Resolution 2020-0018. I'll accept a motion in a second for second reading, suspension under the rules.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Under miscellaneous, want to get an update on our attorney-client viewing meeting space over in the Justice Center. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Matt Reimer, again with the Department of Public Works. I did pass out a briefing sheet. Hopefully, all council members and committee members have that. And so please stop me if I go into too much detail. But as of the last meeting on December 3rd, we briefed you jointly that we would be taking this project on and that we had identified this space as a result of a joint walkthrough through all the stakeholders through the sixth floor space in Jail 1. After that committee meeting on December 3rd, we sought a consultant proposal for the design of that space, received their proposal and initiated a notice to proceed with K2M Design on the 16th of December. On the 8th of this month, we received their draft design submittal. Some excerpts of the design submittal I included on the briefing sheet. And we are currently reviewing that. I issued that draft design submittal to the Public Defender's Office, to Mr. Stanton and Mr. Budzar, as well as to Ms. Gibson and Warden Croucher just last week. And we hope to consolidate all of our review comments, get that back to our consultant here in the next week. We do have a number of other milestones and actions that we need to take to get the project off the ground. Specifically, we have talked briefly with the State of Ohio Bureau of Adult Detention on this project. So they've asked us to submit a letter of intent, which we will do so from the Department of Public Works. We will also, upon completion of the final design, go through the normal approval process of submitting that to the Bureau of Adult Detention through what's called a phase 1 through 3 submittal. We will also complete our application process to the City of Cleveland building official for plans review. And I anticipate then we'll also be in front of you for fiscal agenda appropriation for the project in the month of February. I've tentatively put down the February 25th meeting as, for when I think we'll be ready with a construction estimate to move that forward. I've spoken over the construction duration, procurement times with our facilities maintenance administrator, Mr. Morales, and conservatively, we believe that we're in a fall 2020 construction period, but again, we're just trying to anticipate potentially lengthy review times at the state, but if those shorten, we can certainly move that schedule to the left. We also have some corrections grade material that may have some 8 to 12 week lead times based on our current knowledge of things, and we will work to update you on those lead times as well.
Continue, I'm sorry.
And the last update would be that at the same time that we submit the fiscal agenda appropriation, I'll be giving you an updated capital improvement plan. I anticipate that this project will come out of our general fund capital improvement plan allocation for the year, out of our emergency and special project budget pot, line item rather.
Okay. Any questions on this update? Yes, Mr. Miller.
How much money approximately?
Councilman Miller, I'll be happy to, as soon as we get the estimate from the architect, I'd be happy to forward that on. I don't have a basis for cost at this point in time. I will say that we have allocated $500,000 in our capital improvement plan line item for special project emergencies. It will be within that allocation, in my opinion.
Okay, fine.
Mr. Stanton, are we agreeable on how the movement is?
Very much so, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one thing I forgot to add, we did take the liberty, there's a 7th floor space almost identical to the 6th floor space. We're designing both locations currently as part of the design task order. That gives us flexibility in the event that operationally Ms. Gibson needs a different area considered, but it's just above the current area. We're designing both, or if in the event in the future we wanted to implement both of those areas in this manner, we can do either. So we have some flexibility there.
Thank you. And tell Mr. Dever I greatly appreciate his attention to this. It's been very helpful.
Will do, sir.
Is there anything further from Mr. Reimer? Sheriff, as a follow-up, as far as, thank you, Mr. Reimer. Now, part of the problem was the physical space. The other problem was the availability of time on weekends. I know we've expanded the weekend time. Have we set up anything online where people can sign up to meet with their clients at certain periods during the day? Have we done that yet?
I believe that that's been done, Mr. Chairman. I could let Director Gibson maybe elaborate a bit more on that. I know that she had great involvement in being able to set that up and get it going, but I've not heard any complaints from either the public defender or outside counsel in that regard.
I knew that was, if anything, a two-step process, with the construction being one, but this being probably just as important.
Yes.
With how we fill those spots.
Sure.
Good afternoon, Council. Rhonda Gibson, Administrator of Corrections for the Sheriff's Department. We did extend hours, and the hours for attorney visits are 7 days a week. I brought with me a report, if the council would like to see, where there has been an increase in visits on Saturdays and Sundays. So within a month's time, there is approximately 1,300 attorney visits that have been held, or slots that have been used. I say slots because slots are typically a half an hour, so some attorneys may take more than 30 minutes. We established a phone number for attorneys to call if they are encountering a problem with the visitation, so that an associate warden can address that as soon as possible. We have not established an online scheduling as of yet, but I have not been informed of any problems since we expanded the hours, and the associate wardens have not received any phone calls.
Okay, but are we gonna look at an online sign up? It seems to me that would take any problems away as far as being able to get your client down to be seen. Are we working on that?
Yes, I have looked into that. I have actually also looked into a app on a phone, but it's also an online scheduler.
Right.
There's an issue of notification and who's able to draw that, but I'm working on that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both for your efforts. I know this was kind of an issue that came up last year during budget, and I just want to make sure we're up to date and where we're going, how we're getting there. And it seems everybody's on the same page, which before we weren't. Now hopefully we are, and we'll stay there and have a grand opening sometime in spring.
If I could just real quickly, Mr. Chairman, and to the council and to Mr. Stanton, if anybody, if there's counsel that's having problem either from your office, Mr. Stanton, or outside counsel, you have my number, please let me know directly. I'll get someone on it, or let Director Gibson know as well, and we'll get that rolling if there is an issue.
Okay. Questions for anyone? Okay, we're good. Thank you very much. Next item was the jail food RFP. Where are we at with that?
Good afternoon, Chairman, council members. Donna Cleo, the Sheriff's Fiscal Manager. So the Sheriff and the Fiscal Department, we assigned Stephen Witt, who is part of the fiscal team, to handle this second RFP. He worked with OPD and made several changes to the original RFP. That was sent out, it was issued on December the 2nd. And then it closed on January the 13th, which was last Monday. We received from OPD the proposals. They sent them to Stephen, and Stephen in turn sent them to many of us. We are meeting a week from tomorrow, Wednesday the 29th, in order to discuss all of our next steps. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay. Being that this is the second go-around, I thought it'd be a little bit more aggressive. I think we're a little itchy that we want to get in and get these things fixed, much like I would assume everybody here, but this one's kind of sticking. And is there any idea when we might make a decision?
Like I said, we're going to meet next Wednesday and kind of get the, evaluate, figure out who's going to be doing the scoring, things like that. We have a team pretty much in place. And so our hopes is probably by the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, to have the vendor awarded and have them starting the transition period. That's the hopes. That's that's what we're shooting for.
Okay, okay. Well, let's stay on it.
We are.
We're anticipating moving some better food into that facility, so. Any questions? Yes, sir.
How many bidders did you get?
We got 2 bidders. It was Trinity and Summit. We sent it out to 10 and got 2 bidders.
And the original 3 bidders, right?
Correct.
Responded.
2 of the original 3 submitted a proposal.
And who was the one that we were looking at in the last round but ended up not going with them?
Trinity.
So they're still in the mix?
Correct.
Plus one other competitor?
Plus Summit,
Okay,
who was one of the originals also.
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And so since we have some of the, through the chair to Donna, why is it taking so long to determine this?
Well, first of all, because there was, I know a lot of changes that were being requested to be made in the original RFP. So those changes were being made, and then it was through the holidays, which was also a setback. And then the original close date was going to be December the 6th, but we got many questions from the vendors asking for clarification. So based on that, we decided then they requested we back up the close date a week. So we send out the addendum to all the vendors saying we're going to back it up a week. So we gave them an additional week for their proposals. And again, happening through the holidays, things like that, it just was taking a little longer than normal.
What are some of the RFP changes?
The RFP changes, the main one was to ask the vendors to self-report any terminated contracts in the last 5 years and all details surrounding that contract. I know there was some other changes. If you want those details, I can call Stephen up here if you would like to hear them.
Stephen Witt with the Sheriff's Department. Some of the additional changes were changes that were requested from members of council on the previous RFP or responses to questions that we had received in the original RFP. As Donna mentioned, one of the bigger changes was asking vendors to self-report any terminated contracts and any issues within the last 5 years of issues with their food service at any location.
And what came of that? Out of the RFP, did both companies?
I have not personally reviewed those yet. We are meeting next week to review those.
We just received them last week.
Yeah, the RFP closed last Monday. Then the Office of Procurement and Diversity needs to do their compliance review, and so we received them at the end of last week.
Mm-hmm. And how will this scoring mechanism differ from the one you did previously?
So we have a point value award set for each of the various categories on the RFP.
Is it the same categories as you had last time?
It is the same, but it is weighted slightly different based on the changes such as the self-reporting that is included in the scoring at this point. The scoring committee will be somewhat different. There will be some same members, but there will also be additional members, including the entire warden's complex.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Okay, good news, I guess, but we'll wait and see with bated breath and moving forward with that. And hopefully we can check off another problem over at the jail. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have, and this is a little bit more my concern, I think some of the council shares it also, is, and Mr. Mason just informed us that he's stuck somewhere. So, Sheriff, Ms. Gibson and Mrs. Carney, I guess you're stuck here, coming up. And I don't even know if you can answer this, but at least to put on the record, my concern with the public safety and justice director, I guess I'll call it, whoever, wait, what were you?
No,
What was your title? It was
good afternoon,
Public
Council.
Safety.
Brandy Carney. My title was Chief of Public Safety and Justice Services.
Correct.
So my new title is Chief of Operations. That also deals with public safety and justice The posted position right now is the the chief of public safety position.
And if you don't know, you don't know, but those tasks that were under you when you were that, are they remaining or are they splitting some of those off? And the reason I ask this is because we don't know.
Sure. Understood, counsel. So in the interim, I'm maintaining the job along with Chief of Staff Mason in the interim. The intention is the new Chief of Public Safety and Justice will have direct reports from the Sheriff's Office, the Clerk of Courts, Consumer Affairs, and the Medical Examiner. My new duties include the opioid funding and moving forward with the opioid the current money that we have in future, and then also the public safety and justice agencies that are currently under Alex Pelham. So that would include the CCOMS, the 911 Center, the Emergency Management, the Homeland Security Fiscal Office, and things of that nature.
So it maintains that the Director of Safety is still over all of those individuals and groups that you mentioned, the sheriff being one?
I'm sorry, so the new person, the new chief position will be over the sheriff's office, the clerk of courts, and the medical examiner. My new position that I'm in, I will still be over the positions or the departments that are under Alex Pelham that I used to be director of. So that is those other smaller agencies that I just mentioned.
Okay, well, that's something we're going to have to work through because we gave in the last go round with the charter change, gave autonomy of the sheriff's office to the sheriff, and this goes just the opposite of what that says. And what that says is the law in this county. So that's why I was hoping Mr. Mason was here. We can get an idea of how your new position came about. What are we doing with the other position? Because let's face it, it was a made-up position when Pinckney went in and Bova moved over, and now we don't have you or Bova there. And we have a charter change that says the opposite of what's going on. So we're going to have to figure this thing out. Because the bottom line, in my opinion, if that individual, for whatever reason, I don't think he can or she can be over the sheriff. We'll have to find that out. But if they are and they can be, I think they should be confirmed by this council. Because the chain of command is completely askew the way it is now, the way it was. But now we have the charter change that says pretty clearly the sheriff runs the sheriff's department. And the last thing I want to do is bring somebody in here and start up this budding of it's my job, no, it's my job. And it would be helpful if that were explained to us. And I think it needs to be explained in an open meeting so that people can understand what's going on and the workers can understand what's going on. So I know it's kind of unfair to you to ask that. Does anybody else have any concerns regarding this? Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, okay, so I appreciate you guys being here. I wish Mr. Mason could be here because I think he might have more of the answers, but perhaps not. Ms. Carney, let me just ask you, let's start with you. So the new position that you're going to be directing, it's going to be responsible for what allocating funding for the opioids that we approve, or how's it going to work? I guess I just don't really know much about it. I read about it, but that's about it.
So as most of you know, the current allocation is approximately $23 million that has been identified for agencies throughout the county. So obviously with the opioid epidemic being so large throughout the county and the region, my involvement will be working with those agencies that's receiving the first round of money, identifying metrics, a monthly report, as well as looking to state meetings and involvement with the state and other regional meetings, and then involvement as we move forward with any additional funds that we receive through settlement funds, and identifying what is the best way recommendation to use those future funds, and making sure that we have some metrics and data. I think last time the decision was made well for the first allocation for the $23 million. But if we do get a large pool of money moving forward, we want to make sure to hopefully have some data and some metrics that we are continue to track now that we can use, hopeful for future allocations. And so mine would be, it's a large amount of money, even the fiscal, the logistics of it, the fiscal. So would be the oversight of that right now, working with the medical examiner's office as well as Health and Human Services.
Okay, so, well, I guess one of my questions is, I mean, it required an entire new directorship to do that? I mean, couldn't that have been done under your prior title?
To the councilman, I would say that I've only been in the new position a little over a week, but it is, just myself in the position, and there's so much going on with opioids, just contractually, like I don't, the fiscal, having those different contracts to monitor those contracts, to engagement with so many different agencies throughout the county as well as state. It's a large amount of work for one individual, I would say, just on the opioid piece alone.
Okay, that's fine. So who are you going to report to directly?
Chief of Staff Mason.
So you report to the chief of staff. Now, in order to get any of those funds, we set up that account via legislation.
Correct, we do have that.
So council will have to approve anything that comes out of that fund. So are you going to present reports to us, or how's that going to work?
Absolutely. My intention, and I've worked with council support staff to get on the council president's agenda at least every, like a standing meeting, and that the recommendations would come to council with you guys. Absolutely. Okay. We're doing this together.
Okay. I appreciate that. Now, as far as the new chief of public safety, I just want to clarify. So is that individual reporting to the sheriff, clerk of courts, and medical examiner, or overseeing? Because
oversee those. Oh, I'm sorry.
See, because I'm getting at kind of what my colleague's getting at with respect to the autonomy of the sheriff. We did that charter legislation, charter amendment, and this seems like it is in direct conflict with that. So I just looking for some clarification on that, and I don't know that you're a person that should be answering that, but whoever set up that position. It needs to account for that.
I wasn't part of that conversation, but I think Chief of Staff Mason. I think we can. This
is how we get into these troubles down the road when we do things and don't talk about them. So I think that's something that definitely needs to be discussed, and it might be, it might be in everybody's best interest that we have a conversation, that public conversation.
Right. To be fair, I met with Mr. Mason Saturday, and we discussed this for quite a while. And that's why I was hoping that he could be here. Wherever he's at, he got stuck. I know he was going to come. Those are questions probably for him. I was somewhat satisfied with what he was telling me, but I thought he needed to be here to let the world know where we're at, how we got here, and where we're going. And it might be a good idea. Maybe we agree, maybe we disagree, but we don't even know that yet. It's so I think we should hold that until we have him available, and we'll call another meeting in 2 weeks and have Mr. Mason take us through that. I think it would only be fair.
Okay, that's fine. I do have one more question. I don't know I don't know if any of you guys are able to answer it, but do you know how far along we are in the process of hiring somebody, or is it still just an open position here?
It's my understanding that it is still a posted position, but okay. I can't speak to any specifics. I'm sorry.
Okay, I appreciate it. All right, thank you.
Ms. Baker, then Mr. Miller.
All right. I have just a couple of questions. First of all, when do you anticipate the balance of the settlement to be deposited for our use?
So Councilman Baker, we currently have the initial, the $23 million. We currently have received that money.
Right.
However, we are completing the legislation, which will move forward to put on a fiscal agenda in order to move that money into the individual or the agencies throughout the county that were already determined to receive that 23. So right now it's in one pot of money in an index code. After the legislation, we can move it to those 8 or 9 different agencies that allocation would come through. I want to make sure personally that I'm meeting with all those agencies first, and we have a monthly metrics in place, that we have a plan in place, a report in place, so that, when they have the money and we have a timeline from them, so there's specific goals to move forward with it.
That's the 23 million that we have in our hands now.
That's correct.
What about the anticipated larger dollars that are to come from the settlement?
I know that the possible case itself could start in October of this year. If something were to settle, I heard it could possibly be in the summer, but I can't speak. We don't have that money for the next round of money.
Okay, I'll pass on that right now. The second question I have is the chief public safety position that we are now seeking. Could you say again who is taking that responsibility for that role, and how are we able to manage that without that person in place? I mean, that's a pretty big job. So how is it that we're able to manage the hole that's left since you've taken over the chief of operations for the opioid?
So I am still working in that role, in my previous role, as well as Mr. Mason has been really involved, the chief of staff. But that position is currently posted. So it was my understanding they were hoping to fill it sometime soon, but I don't know the timeline on that exactly.
So Mr. Mason and yourself, plus the duties that you've taken on and his duties, you're able to fill the position of the chief public safety? It just seems like there could be a setup for problems that you may not be able to overcome because you don't have the time to devote as you did before.
I would just say, Councilwoman, each of the agencies under the chief's position that I had, the sheriff is, a wonderful sheriff and runs his sheriff's department, the medical examiner the same, that, each administrator for their own agency. So there's a lot of larger projects. Again, Chief of Staff Mason's being involved in, such as central booking. I'm still involved with the opioid. It is a lot, even just meetings and the lay of the land on opioid now. But again, that's where the decision, I think, was made by them in order to have 2 separate positions. So in the interim, that's the goal, but it was my understanding that's why they were moving forward quickly.
So you have no concerns that nothing will fall through the cracks, that because of the time you're spending now away from that position, that there aren't going to be things that we're not going to be able to identify or manage or oversee? You're confident that you can do your job and that job, along with Mr. Mason doing his job and that job?
In this interim period, yes, we're able to do that. The hope is that it would be filled soon if that's moving forward quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Carney, we passed legislation that our colleague Councilman Schron sponsored and we all supported to create a separate fund where all of the opiate settlement money would be housed before it's dispersed to any agencies. Has that been done? Is that now in place?
So Councilman Miller, the fund there's an index code, so the county does have that $23 million. The money has not been put on a fiscal agenda and moved to the agencies that has been allocated to.
Madam Chair, that wasn't quite my question.
I'm sorry, sir.
My question is that it's supposed to be in a separate fund, not in the general fund. Has that been done?
Councilman, it is my understanding it's in a separate fund, but I will confirm that, but it is a separate, the legislation itself to accept that money qualified it that it's separate opioid-specific funding, so it's not part of the general fund, but I can confirm that that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Carney, I'd also like to follow up on Councilwoman Baker's line of questioning. We had the original 23 million, and after we had the 23 million, there was a second round of settlements with big players. These are not pending. These are things that we passed legislation to settle with them, and it was a total of something like 260 million. But when we shared it with Summit County and attorney's fees got paid and a few other little things got taken care of, it ended up being something like 104 million. When are we expecting to get that money?
Apologies for the confusion earlier. So actually our allocation, thank you, Councilman, our allocation is expected to be what I've been told, $80 to $90 million. When the lawyer's fees and the Summit County money is taken out of that initial, that 80 to 90 million, it's my understanding that we can expect sometime this summer. I don't have all the details on that, but I can make sure to get those for you.
I must have misunderstood something. I didn't think it was going to take that long. Why? Can you have any explanation as to why it's going to take until this summer?
I apologize. That's the information that I had since I've been in the role this week. But if I could go back and get some further detail and clarify that for you.
That would be great. And also as to why it's 80 to 90 million and not 104 million, because I thought the 104 million was a pretty firm number. So I'd like a little clarification on that as well.
Absolutely, I can do that for you.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, I have one question for Ms. Carney that's not related to this particular line of discussion. Would that be acceptable at this time? I learned that we're in the process of planning to initiate a whole new round of contracts with municipalities to house prisoners for various municipalities. And my question is why we're doing that, because we don't really have enough space to totally take care of our own prisoners within rated capacity. And is this part of some bigger strategy that I don't know all of what's behind it? Can you explain why it is that we're doing that?
Sure, Councilman. I think that's a fair question. I can start and let either the sheriff or Administrator Gibson. The contracts that you might be speaking of are contracts that have been in place to date. They just are recently expiring. So those would be, for example, for us to take their prisoners for jail services. Those would be places like Moreland Hills, like Richmond Heights, places that we've been taking their prisoners. They already contracted with us, and those contracts were coming to an end, and so we were renewing those contracts. The only new contract for prisoners that should come in front of you right now would be for the city of Euclid, and that's because of the situation with us closing the city of Euclid jail. So the rest were only, for the most part, smaller departments and smaller numbers, and they are not new agencies. There's agencies that we had already taken their prisoners to date.
I think that I didn't express this properly. Because I didn't mean to suggest that they're new contracts,
Okay.
or that they're new municipalities. my question is more along the line of, given that all the problems that have developed around the jail and all the problems around capacity, why did we not decide that we're gonna that when these contracts expire, that's gonna be the end of it, and that we're not gonna contract with municipalities to house prisoners because we have enough of a challenge to take care of our own? Why instead of that are we renewing these contracts and continuing to do this?
Do one of you guys want to take this one? I can let the sheriff or administrator speak to this. I would just say, I think your concern is valid. Moving forward as we have been with the centralized booking idea throughout the county, and the build out of the current space that's in the jail that just added approximately 100 new beds and to increase the capacity. I think the mentality was that these are some agencies that we already contracted with them to go back to them and ask them to find other places to take their jailing services now that are limited throughout the county, and then possibly in some time in the future ask them to come back to us. That's a concern for the municipalities themselves. So I think the thought process was to continue to work with the municipalities that we have right now and not take new agencies. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Sheriff?
Yeah, and just to piggyback off Ms. Carney here, as she said, some of these contracts were in place. Some of them were active contracts and in place when I started here back in August. I know that some of the communities that Ms. Carney had mentioned have limited holding space, and they, I'll just throw Lindale out there for example. I don't believe Lindale is a contract city with us, but many of them have limited holding space, and I think that due to the work of Director Gibson, we've been able to effectively manage our current inmate population, even though we are, I don't know how many we are over our capacity today, but we've been able to effectively manage the inmate population and do what we have to do on our end to be able to hold the limited number of people that are being sent down to the county jail by these communities.
Excuse me, can I just interrupt for 1 minute?
Yes, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard that, and I apologize, I can't stay long. I got a meeting that I interrupted for this, but the opioid money, the second round, I believe came in last week. So if it's not in, I don't know if it's actually transferred yet, but the papers have all been signed, and it should be. I think Ms. Carney was right that it was in the $90 million category that came in, and I believe the difference between your understanding, Councilman Miller, and the actual amount was also that the court ordered a holdback of something like 7.5% on top of the summit money and the attorney's fees to cover additional potential general costs. We may or may not ever see that holdback money. So I think that's the difference.
It had been mentioned that was a possibility.
Yeah, that's what happened. The court made that order. Thank you.
Okay. So, getting...
And if it's not in yet, it should be in promptly. So,
okay.
And I know that Ms. Carney already is going around. In fact, I just had a conversation with Dr. Boutros today. He's working on proposal, working with various stakeholders on the opioid next round, phase 2. The Cleveland Clinic has made a proposal for opioid money, phase 2. We've been meeting with other stakeholders. That's one of Ms. Carney's tasks, is to help develop a proposal which ultimately will come to council. That is the plan.
Thank you. Getting back for a moment to the municipalities, does central booking require that we house prisoners for other municipalities, or does it require only what his name implies, that we have one central place where the prisoners originally come for booking?
I'm not sure, Councilman, how the whole central booking is going to play into this with the municipalities. I don't believe that protocol's been fully established yet as far as what's going to happen when they come down to the county jail. I do know that, a lot of the design of the central booking project is to make services available to the people that we book in and that we house at the county jail. But as far as other protocols, I apologize, but I'm not aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
I think if this is helpful, the central booking is really only going to be a process by which those that we're dealing with right now. We don't deal with Lakewood. Lakewood couldn't bring their prisoner down and get booked and everything else, so they got to be on board. We don't have the room, so it's almost the cart before the horse a little bit. But if we have the people that we're dealing with, the individual communities that we're dealing with, it's a start. But we really, ideally, would want all the municipal courts on board, all the municipal jails on board. Everybody's got to be pulling in the same direction. We don't have that as of yet. And the concern I think Mr. Miller has is real, in that I think it's a great idea to do this. I think it's the modern way to do it. I think it really cleans out your jail of people that don't necessarily need to be there, that are still being processed there now, and you know that, Sheriff, more than anybody. Rhonda, you do too. But we went about it the wrong way, and we're kind of paying for that right now. So to kind of leave who we had on board, kind of just let them go and say the contract's expired, it's a little difficult to do that because they have probably shut their jails down and laid off their staff and did whatever they had to do. And to go back and do that is really unfair. The only one it isn't unfair to is Euclid, which goes into my next question. Why are we still in Euclid? That was January 1, lockdown out.
Euclid, I believe it had asked for an extension till the end of this month.
To cut a deal with us.
I don't know if, I don't know anything about any deals that they might be.
Well, no, their prisoners have to go to somewhere.
Okay.
And I know they were shopping, and now we're stuck with another month in Euclid. Did they pay rent? Do we know?
They will be,
For
it's my
the-
understanding.
for January?
Sure, so it's my understanding that they would still be paying the contracted amount that it was previously. I had never heard otherwise, Councilman.
Which also brings me to my next question, Mr. Miller. What are we charging a day per inmate? Have we figured out that magic number yet? Because it isn't the Cleveland number, we all know that.
The new contract. Donna Cleo, the new contracts, once put into place, would be 105, I think 105.26 per inmate per day.
Is that Cleveland?
No, because Cleveland, we're contractually bound to the 2% increase. So being that we're contractually bound, Cleveland, the best we could do is 101.98 per day. But our costs were based more on my calculations, which at the end of October, when we started this, was 105 per inmate per day.
See, Mr. Miller, when this all started, it all sounded good. We had, not you folks, people in front of us telling us everything was solid, the numbers were solid, the program was solid, and it was sour. It didn't work, hasn't worked, and now we're stuck. What are we eating probably a day per inmate?
Well, right now, at the end of November, based on all three jails combined, I haven't finished my December numbers, but based on all three jails combined, my new number per inmate per day is 117. And that was at the end of November. Again, I can get you, once I
That
finish this,
break even?
$117 per inmate per day. So since we're getting right now 99 from Cleveland and we're still billing the 99 till the new contracts come into place for the munis. If you want to know an overall loss, I can get you that.
I know, what's the number? What's that magic number? We got new food coming in that's not calculated. Was Metro calculated on this?
Metro is being calculated starting because they used to bill us quarterly, and then once the new contract went into place, now I get billed monthly, and those bills are they're quite higher than they will quarterly. The quarterly invoices ranged from $700,000 to $900,000. Now they're $1 million a month.
Right. Ballpark it for me here. I'm just looking for that number, and we're not going to hold you to it. It's not 99, it's not 101, it's not 105, and I'm guessing it certainly isn't 117th. What's that break-even number that we need to get to where the taxpayers of Cobb County aren't getting screwed?
My best guess right now would probably be somewhere in the area of 120 per inmate per day. That's my best guess right now.
Okay. We really can't calculate that till the meals and Metro is settled.
And till the meals and Metro is settled, and also once Euclid comes out, so Euclid comes out because that's a high cost right now. That's a jail, and we're not housing that many out there. So once I take them out of the mix, now I'm going to be telling you the cost, the overall with 2 jails combined, not 3. So that's going to also affect the numbers. So that's all in the works right now, but I would be comfortable at this time saying 120 per inmate per day, but that's at this time.
Right, and I get that. My friends, this is why it is so important that we get the jail built. So important. And I have other concerns with that committee dragging their feet, but they're moving a little bit, slower than I want, but they're moving a little bit. Mr. Miller attends rather regularly. We have to get this jail built as soon as possible. And that's why we're going to have to eat these for 3 years until that jail is built. But going to Mr. Miller's point, at that point in time, we're going to have either everybody on board or those that are on board, that's it. Nobody else gets on board when we start the process of central booking. And any community, any municipality that doesn't jump on central booking, shame on them. Shame on them. Then you're dealing with all these little castles everywhere in the world. It should be downtown. We should be starting to do it right. We have a process, hopefully a plan to do it right and save money for everybody. So we've got 3 years to build it. It'll take 3 years to build it, get that done. And we've got a little bit of wiggle room to add everybody in there. That's where I don't see the movement. And we'll have that further discussion with Mr. Mason also. So I think we'll hold any further comments about the chief's job and what we're going to do and the history behind that and the plan going forward. It would be helpful to us. We'll let him know that. Is there anything? Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Off of this topic and back to the chief of operations for the opiate funding. I wanted to get back to this now that we've got the number. I should have had more confidence to say, I know that there's more money coming in. I remember when we all settled it, but we have a 90 million and a 23 million. We have 113 million that we know of right now without any other litigation that's going on later this summer that we have within our reach to finally help those that are in need of opiate treatment. So as chief of operations and in charge of the opiate dollars, do you have or are you preparing before the first dollar is spent what your vision is? Is it first come, first serve? Is it, yeah, that sounds like a good program, so let's put 10 million in it or 20 million? Do you have something that you can share with us before the dollars start going and reducing that 113 down as to where you think it should be allocated. And before it gets to a point where you're asking us for approval of something that, it's hard to say no when it's already gone through the process that they perhaps have gone through, like the first 23 million. What is your thoughts of giving a spreadsheet or a vision or something in writing that this percentage needs to go for those that are suffering with addiction? This percentage is for those that need workforce training because of their addiction. This percentage, there's a lot of need out there. We're talking about housing and bedding and all kinds of different issues that come from this. What are you thinking you're going to do to prepare so that we don't get off track of whoever is the loudest gets the money mentality?
Sure. Thank you, Councilwoman. Understanding your point, absolutely. So, as you're aware, there's already been a promise for the first 23 million. Yeah. And so I want to make sure right now, before that money goes to any of those agencies, that we have a standard report that they submit to me monthly, that they're identifying that we have the number of people that they're helping, the number of beds, what those metrics are and how they're meeting them. And so we can really look at, the data on how this money's being spent and being used before there's any determination for the next 80 or 90 million. As Executive Budish said, last week, there's already been a number of people in the community that have put together proposals for that next round of 80 or 90 million. But right now, let's look at some of the data and the metrics, and then we can look at these proposals and see truly, if they're going to touch all pieces of the spectrum, not just, people that are help with the addiction, but on the preventative side, on the entire spectrum. So my goal is to look at, this first allocation, to get some reports and to share that with you guys before we make any determination for the next 80 or 90 million.
Okay, so you hopefully will have an idea of what you, through your resources, of how that extra 90 million should be spent, and not just driven by proposals of what well-intended programs may be. But I guess I don't want to hear when we're down to 30 million. If we just had an extra 10 million, this would have been a great program. We should have been perhaps thinking forward at the time that we were giving this money away. This is one-time money. Mm-hmm. We got one chance at it. I'll be looking for the 90 million or 80 or 90 million that's left, what your plan is before the first dollar is even spent, not by what an agency says they need.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that statement. That is the plan. We'll come to you and the recommendation before any of that money is spent.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
I'd like to follow up on that. I think Ms. Baker is right on target. And I don't want to see the plan when you say that we've consulted with everybody, we've spent months on it, this is what we want to do, and we don't want any changes. We want to see it, at least I do, well before it's a final proposal, so that we can have input.
I would say, we're writing this plan together. As I mentioned before, I asked to have every 3 weeks or weekly meeting with council president, but any of the council members, and for us to make these determinations with the information I can bring to you guys to make those determinations together moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, perhaps to keep in mind, especially given I've been here for a few years, grants and matching funds and all those opportunities that are out there that perhaps can make that 90 million turn into 150 million because of doing our due diligence in researching what perhaps we can qualify for with the leverage we have with $90 million to spend. Is that something that you've considered?
Absolutely. I have a history in grants. I talked to the new fiscal chief about this, seeing what's out there, seeing where we can get the most bang for our buck, so to speak, because like you said, it's only one-time money. And so we want to make sure that we have the biggest impact that we can, considering the situation at hand right now, when we determine where these dollars will go. So that's absolutely the intention. Thank you.
Okay, anything for, yes, ma'am?
Is the money coming directly to the agencies once they contract, or are they going to be on a monthly invoice?
Councilwoman, the only thing I can say right now is it's in the opioids fund that we spoke of before. It's my understanding that it'll be a fiscal agenda for the other agencies, for example, that are within our structure, our county government structure, that it would be transferred to them on a fiscal agenda. But again, that's something that it's my intention to watch and have oversight. But again, being only a weekend, I'd have to come back to you in some of the
So all
details.
the organizations currently for the 23 million are in-house,
Some of them are quasi-organizations. For example, one of them is Adams Board, and then their plan is to sub-recipient to 3 organizations that are outside that they already deal with. For example, Stella Maris is one of
they
those.
would get the full.
That's correct, and then they would be required to monthly report to them, those agencies up to Adams, and then Adams, the monthly report that's required back to the county here to myself.
Okay. Is Metro Health one of them?
Metro Health is one of the agencies in the initial 23 million.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I know it was a little unfair to have you up here without Mr. Mason, but we will get that discussion down the line with him and hopefully get a connectivity of where we're going with some of these dollars, certainly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Is there anything further? Okay, we're adjourned.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, yes, sir.
just to remind everybody, at 3 o'clock this afternoon, we have the ERP meeting. Thank you.
See you at 3 o'clock.